and welcome back to Intimate Lea. I am beyond excited to welcome Anne Desjardins to the show today because she is an Ayurvedic health practitioner and she specializes in mind-body healing. She also is a host of her own incredible podcast, The Silver Lyming. And Anne's story, though, is more than that because after living through a life-altering health crisis, Lyme disease, and mold toxicity, emotional and physical abuse. She went on to a deep journey and connected between the physical illness and the emotional trauma and a spiritual awakening. So today she wants to help people understand that there's deeper messages inside of their own chronic illness. And then she helps guide you back to your health, your intuition, and even your purpose. So through speaking, teaching, storytelling, Anne is showing us that any diagnosis can be a doorway to transformation. So, Anne, welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here as well. I love your podcast and your messages as well. And I'm just really excited to have this space to share some more about what I do.
Yay! We got to know each other through a spiritual community here in Naples, Florida. And she found out I had a podcast, and then I found out hers was on Lyme disease. And I was just like, what are the odds? What timing? I am leaving in a week to go visit my granddaughter in Ohio, who's 2. They live in the country. They're always exposed to the nature, ticks, everything that's out there. So I was started researching, and I was like, wow. One of the things I read was that 2026 tick season is kind of estimated to be the worst ever with ER visits since 2017, and that Ohio and Kentucky and West Virginia are projected to see the highest jumps in Lyme disease because the black-legged tick has spread into that territory. And then not only that, I was reading that Pfizer's Lyme has a vaccine now that in March of 2026, it's kind of in a late stage trial. And it's showing like 70% efficacy, but I don't know like the time frame you've got to get to that. Some people say that, you've got 24 to 48 hours to catch it. I've heard 15 minutes. So there's a lot of information out there, and I think that you're the perfect expert to maybe clarify some of that. And I kind of want to start with knowing a little bit more about you. I read that you went 7 years before you got a real diagnosis, and I'm really curious what kept getting missed so that you could tell someone, if you suspect it's Lyme disease, but they're maybe like not taking you seriously, what happened?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And sadly, my story is not uncommon in the Lyme community and people who are diagnosed. And generally speaking, people have this um, thought that you're going to get a bullseye rash, you're going to know immediately, yeah, you definitely got it. But only about 35% of people actually present with a bullseye rash. And also, when we look at people like you and I, we've got a lot of hair on our head. And so, if I had a bullseye rash on my head, probably wouldn't see it, right? So for me, I think I'm I'm still not totally sure. I got bit by a tick when I was 20. And my dad put me on antibiotics prophylactically. He's a retired physician and was doing his best to prevent issues for me. And then through my 20s, I had some weird immune things starting to happen to me. Um, it's no secret, but I got diagnosed with HPV. And that was probably like the first mark against immune things. I had gone back to college maybe when I was 26, 25 or 26. I was working 2 jobs, so I was taking 5 to 6 classes a semester, working 2 jobs, and I was dealing with a very unhealthy romantic partner who was more on the abusive side of the spectrum, and I think through that experience, it was kind of like the pressure cooker where by the time things ended when I was 30 with that person, I graduated. I was still working 2 jobs, but I think that really drove the symptoms, right? A lot of times with Lyme, like we're never really sure sometimes where it starts, but it takes a big stressor or some emotional trauma to really make it activate in your system. And I do think that's what happened to me again in like my 20s. Stuff was a little bit wonky and maybe had not all these other stressors and pressures come at the same time. Maybe it would never have expressed itself. But I was also living in a very moldy house at that time too. And I think that just compounded things tremendously. But when I eventually ended that relationship, um, much it was good, but I mean, I was living in fear, literally, like, looking over my shoulder for a good amount of time to make sure that I wasn't gonna die that way. That's really when things started to go very haywire for me, and it started with an incredible fatigue, like, I can't even express to people what that was like. I often say if I ran a marathon every day for a month, I ran a full marathon. I didn't sleep at all any night of that month, and I drank and was hungover every day. It still wouldn't be close to the amount of fatigue that I was feeling.
Wow.
And I would get a weird sensation in the left side of my face, which looking back now is some sort of a Bell's palsy. I was losing the hearing in my left ear. I stuttered a lot. I couldn't have conversations with people because I couldn't remember what we were talking about. So doing something like this would have been next to impossible for me. I couldn't remember people's names I had known my whole life. I had a lot of emotional spectrum disorder, if you will. I cried every day. I was angry. I was very OCD. I would leave my house and go back and check to make sure I locked the door constantly. Like it was more of annoying and really than anything. I just struggled a lot and really felt like God made me as a broken human because I started going to doctors and I was like, listen, these are my symptoms. This is what's happening. I had night sweats, heart palpitations, hives, insomnia. But really, what was driving my request for help was the fatigue. Like it was crippling. And at one point, a doctor that I was going to had diagnosed me with narcolepsy. I did a sleep study and I was told I didn't have apnea, which I thought maybe was what was wrong because a lot of my family has apnea, but no, I don't have apnea. And then they did a series of 5 naps the next day, and I fell into REM maybe 3 out of 5 of the naps that they give you within 5 minutes, which they said was abnormal. So again, diagnosed me with narcolepsy, put me on Provigil, which is a shift sleep disorder stimulant. No impact on me other than it costs a lot of money, even with insurance that was like $1,000 a month. And when I went back to see the doctor, I was like, okay, how long until this stuff works? Because I'm still just as tired. I don't feel any better. He's like, well, you should have noticed something right away. So, okay, we're going to cross that off. I got every other blood test known to man. I remember going to get tested for HIV because if you Google, a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing line up with HIV. I was terrified that that's what I had because when the lady came out with my results, she didn't make eye contact with me, and I freaked, like, I burst into tears. I was like, "That's because she knows what she's about to have to tell me," and she basically was like, "Stay off the internet. You don't have it." I was like, "Okay, great," but, like, just anything and everything I could think of to get tested for, I did. And again, I mentioned my dad's a retired physician, but he had a lot of connections in the community. And not that they wouldn't try that hard for other people, but I know they really tried hard for me to figure out what was wrong. And after about 4 years of getting told that I was just too stressed and I was overly emotional, I gave up, right? Like I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just gonna have to accept my fate. And like again, I was really angry at God and just said, I don't understand why you're doing this to me. Like, why am I so broken? Like, I'm a big doer person. And so to be stuck in that space was really difficult for me. And then for the next 3 years, or maybe even four, I drank a lot. It was about the only thing that I could do to sleep. And I really don't know how I managed. Like, I worked during this time because I didn't really have backup plan for income or anything. Like it was just me. I had a mortgage in my name and you don't really qualify for disability if there's nothing medically wrong with you. So, I gotta make things work. So somehow through the grace of God, I was able to at least function enough to work. And then towards the end before my diagnosis, I I can remember I was incredibly scared to drive because if I turned my head too fast, I got really dizzy. And I was really scared that I was going to kill someone else's family member. Like, I accepted that I was dying, and I knew that one day they would find me on the sidewalk, maybe walking my dog, because I really struggled hard to even do that. And, but again, the thought of, like, taking out someone else's family member was too much, and so I went back to a doctor. Oh, I also lost my coordination. I couldn't put a screw through a hole, and I was 38 at the time, and I was like, "Something is really, really wrong here." And I assumed by then maybe I had a brain tumor, because again, with the hearing loss, with the coordination misfunction, with all the issues that I had neurologically, like, that was one of the last things that I could think of possibly that it was. And I remember telling my parents how much I loved them and that I was going to a doctor, but I was pretty sure I was going to get diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I have a photo of me, like, probably the week before I went back to that doctor, and I can see, like, when I look in my eyes in that picture, how dead I was. Like, it turned me into a living, breathing zombie. And I was a shell of a human. And I stopped at the beach because I was like, this is probably the last time you're going to have hair on your head. Because I figured I was about to go through chemo or whatever radiation because of this tumor. And so I just wanted to stop and see the ocean one more time. And then when I finally went back to a doctor, I had asked for an Eastern minded physician recommendation because I was really done with Western medicine by this point. And they sent me that Facebook, a lot of people recommended me to go to this one office. So I wound up going there, and that person was like, I'm pretty sure you have Lyme, but let's just start there. Cause I mean, I was listing off 100 different things that I wanted to be tested for. And she's like, let's just start there and see what happens. And that was a Wednesday. That Friday, I got my results back that were positive that I did have Lyme. And so they put me on 5 weeks of antibiotics, which I'm pretty sure, like, within 3 days, I started to feel a lot more human. I can remember sitting on the couch and crying, and I was like, "Oh my god, my brain's working again." Like, wow. And also too, I might add, like, getting an actual diagnosis, what a relief that was, because for 7 years, 8 years, like, I was just living with the thought that I was crazy, basically. And so then I actually got diagnosed, and it was like, "Oh, what a relief." Like, I'm not there is legitimately something wrong here. But once I started on treatment, I did feel better, but then I started to revert back into zombie zone. And I can remember being out to dinner with friends and not remembering what we were talking about in our conversation. And I was like, oh no, well, hell no. So I called the doctor back and I was like, listen, I need more antibiotics. That this isn't gone. Like, we need to put me on more drugs. And, I was always taught that you go on antibiotics for um 30 days and it goes away, but that's really not what happened. And so she tested me again, and this time instead of testing positive, it was equivocal. So in my brain, I was going in the right direction, that it wasn't a full positive anymore. Um, and so she agreed to give me 3 more weeks, thankfully. When I was done with 8 weeks now of antibiotics, I felt pretty okay. Um, and then I think it was probably, if I remember right, Memorial Day, the following spring, I wound up with a bullseye rash on my leg, and I was like, "Oh my god." And so I took a picture and I sent it to her, but I'm pretty hyper vigilant of my body now, like, I'm constantly checking and looking, and I was like, "There's no way I missed a tick on my leg," and I thought maybe it was a mosquito bite, but whatever it was, she gave me more antibiotics. Okay, fine. So then when I went off of those, I was really compelled to help other people. And I wound up starting a support group for Berks County, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. And they have a group of doctors called ILADS doctors. It's ILADS, International Lyme and Associated Disease Society. And these are the true specialists of Lyme and tick-borne illness. And partly selfishly, I started that support group so that I could have the inside track of where to go for help and for treatment. But then I also started to do quick tick tips on social media. And when I actually saw a video recording of my face, not just a selfie where my face is still or putting on my makeup and I'm not running my mouth, um, I saw that I had Bell's palsy. And I was like, oh, dear God, like, how did a doctor not recognize this? Like, it wasn't like a full Bell's palsy, like, I can't blink my eye or anything, but my left eye would water all the time, and still even sometimes if I get too tired or too stressed, I can I can see it when I take a selfie or something, I'm like, "Oh, there it is." Like, it's just not quite right. There's a very big imbalance in my face, and so I started to go to a Lyme specialist, but the trouble with that is that they're not covered by insurance. And so if you're interested in this as an active listener, feel free, please, to reach out to your local elected officials and let them know that this is not acceptable, that we need insurance coverage for people who are falling through the cracks like this that wind up with chronic Lyme. And I mean, that cost me $550 an hour to see her. And I was going to see her every 4 to 6 weeks. In addition to the fact that I was on $900 a month of supplements, then we're gonna layer in all the different testing I had to have, all the different energy works that I started to do because I was raised in a Western medicine family. Like, we didn't really believe in a lot of the things that now I'm even certified in. It just wasn't something that we looked to. Like, you take your medicine from the doctor and you get better and you go on with your life. But that's
And
not
so
what happened.
so is that where you took this kind of into your own hands and started combining Western and Ayurvedic medicine and Reiki and herbs? Because I love medicines and doing more of the homeopathic routes whenever we can. And then the Reiki incorporates the nervous system, the energy body. And so, what was your experience with your Lyme disease when you started practicing all of those things and incorporating them together?
Well, people often ask me, how did you heal? And I'm like, well, if it was just one short, quick thing, I'd love to tell you about it, but it's really not. It is a combination of everything. And I think for me, what I first started to do was hot yoga. And I often attribute that to helping to save my life. And even during yoga, a lot of times I'd be crying, and I was kind of embarrassed about that. But I asked one of my yoga teacher friends, and she's like, "No, that's just trauma coming out. That's okay. You're okay." But even when I first started to practice that, like I couldn't even stand through the practice. I just laid on the floor and cried. Literally, that's what I.
Traditional 90-minute Bikram that you practice?
Yeah,
That's my
and I'm like,
this, and from what I understand, those emotional releases that you're experiencing in there is the fascia releasing because we get to do those beautiful stretches and hold them where we're getting deep into that fascia network where that trauma is held. So that's
yeah,
amazing that you were experiencing that there and letting it go. That's
yeah.
true embodiment. Good for you.
And then I kept going back. My instructor at the time, unfortunately, has since passed away, but he was a great person and he'd crack the window for me a little bit and give me cold coconut water and cold towels. And like I'd crawl out of the room on my hands and knees and just keep coming back. And I think maybe that's potentially where I first learned about Ayurveda, which for your listeners, if you're not familiar with Ayurveda, that's the oldest holistic medicine system in the world from India. And I also learned about a book called Unlocking Lyme, which is written by Dr. Bill Rawls. And he really talks a lot about a protocol called Buhner's protocol, Buhner. And I think it was Stephen Buhner who developed a protocol based off of herbs. And that's how Dr. Rawls helped to heal himself was through that specific protocol. So at first I was terrified. I was like, I'm on antibiotics. I can't take anything else. And then I was like, oh girl, you need to get but moving on the herbs, get on the good probiotics, really start helping yourself. And that's where I became a lot more proactive with things like dry brushing or lymphatic massage, or I did raindrop massage technique where they put certain essential oils on your spine and on your soles of your feet. And I really learned a lot more about essential oils, and they are a gift from God. They're really the only thing particle wise that's small enough to penetrate our blood brain barrier. Antibiotics aren't that small, they can't cross there, but the infections can. And so you need something that's able to combat on that level. So there's a great book I read. It was Healing Oils of the Ancient Bible, I think is what it's called, or maybe Ancient Healing Oils of the Bible. I might have that name a little off, but fantastic read. And it really talks about the importance of things like frankincense and myrrh. And there's a reason why those have been around for so long. And they were such valued gifts to give to baby Jesus because they were really potent and powerful things. Um, that's also when I started to get into things like Reiki or and I've had some wild out of body experiences with Reiki, just beautiful. But I again wasn't really trained to think that these things were good as a child. Like, that wasn't what my upbringing said. But all of these things that I've learned to do, facial diagnostics, palm reading, Reiki, theta healing, these are all definitely more of an energy-based modality that helped me when I was healing, and I found them to be so valuable that I took the time then to educate myself in them. And again, I went back to school to become an Ayurvedic practitioner because with my support group, I mean, by now I'm easily in the thousands of people that I've talked to and helped on their journey. And I felt very compelled to learn some kind of formal system to help people. Again, partly selfish that I was like, and you can help yourself with this too. But I did want to also help other people. And I knew how much Western medicine had failed me in a sense, right? Like for me to go from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to be told that it was in my head and there was nothing really wrong with me. When in the state of Pennsylvania, that's the highest ranking state of infection for 11 out of the last 13 years. And for no doctor to make mention of to me about tick-borne illness or Lyme, like that's that's not good. And that just shows area of opportunity that we have to educate our healthcare practitioners more so in the Western medicine world.
Yeah, that's giving me a hit because I'm studying peptides a little bit, and I also study the energy work of how our energy is passed down from our mother because she is the only one that contributes the DNA strand for the mitochondria. That's the only thing that the male doesn't contribute to. So that energy continually is getting passed down, and we're finding that autoimmunes are on the rise. People's nervous systems aren't being able to be regulated. What is one piece of outdated Lyme disease then now that needs to be retired so that more things can come through like this? And where do people find this information?
Well, for me, I think one thing that we really need to do away with is the CDC's definition of a positive diagnosis, because they've even admitted that it's faulty in their own right of saying that you have to have these five specific bands to test positive for Lyme. I would counter to say, how am I testing positive for any band of Lyme had I not come into contact with it? But they have said that that is not really accurate. And also to couple that then with the thought that it's not just Lyme that ticks are transmitting, that there's a lot of other co-infections. And that Lyme testing that we're getting, the ELISA and the Western blot, which is covered by insurance, is at best 35% accurate in and of itself, which is deplorable for a diagnostic tool, and it's only looking for Lyme. It's not looking for the co-infections. Different infections require a different kind of treatment and different testing. And if you're not having the full package, you might really miss something. So I also had things like Bartonella, anaplasmosis, cytomegalovirus, elevated levels of Epstein-Barr. I had, HPV. I'm going to lump that into this because it was an immune deficiency that my body was not able to fight that off adequately.
Mhm.
And then you have to look for mold and heavy metals. And again, I just think that the CDC in their best efforts to try to help people has really done a lot of damage in that effort, because that five band requirement is not a true measure.
I understand. And you also said something that I found really interesting that this was triggered after a trauma, right? I know other autoimmunes, such as Addison's disease, can be triggered after a trauma. I have a girlfriend whose mother had fallen. I think she was ice skating and hit her head on the ice and then got diagnosed with Addison's disease. Okay. Then she had two twin daughters, didn't have the trauma, were born with Addison's disease, right? So it's like, where is this trauma held in this energy center? And how do we really eliminate that? I heard you say that you found it in Bikram practices. I do it with my Lee activation and somatic work with people, getting them into that deeper state, where the energy can be felt and witnessed, and they're out of their thinking that they can understand it and they just witness what's happening. What are some other things? Help me get some information out to these people.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can really kind of help to work through that. And journaling is a great vehicle, meditation, breath work. And it's truly learning to hear the body, right? All of these things that symptomatically are happening to us is a representation of dis-ease in the body. And we're in the space that we're taught to go as fast as possible, basically like zoom around here, zoom around there, quick, 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 quick. And when are we actually sitting with self to hear what the body's actually needing and telling us? And that took a lot of practice for me to sit long enough with self in silence without any kind of stimulation to allow me to hear myself. And I think that's a really good tool. And a lot of people are like, I don't know how to meditate. I don't know how to do this. And I'll tell you, I even signed up to get taught how to meditate because I felt like that as well. But really, the idea isn't to turn your mind off, but it's really to learn how to um, excuse the thoughts, if you will, and focus back on something like your breathing, or you can start with a guided meditation if that's easier for you. And someone's actually talking to you, so it's a little bit of an external stimulation, but that's okay. And again, it's kind of going to walk you through seeing things and, picture the healing, not just picture it, but feel what it feels like to feel healthy. And I know some of us have been sick for so long that it's really kind of hard to remember, or maybe you were born and you were never healthy, but practice feeling that because that's really just drawing that energy a lot more into your system and saying to the universe, like, this is more of what I want. This is how I want to feel. Um, but breath work also is probably one of the most transformative things that I can think of that is not requiring something like alcohol or drugs or whatever it is to achieve. Like you can really completely alter your state of being through breath work. And as I speak these words, I also know that some people with tick-borne illness and probably other illnesses have a challenge breathing, but even if we just start slow and small, that's okay. But that is our life force energy too. And if we're not taking that breath into our system, like I said that I felt like a zombie. It felt like my whole being was petrified and not afraid petrified, like petrified as in like turned to stone. And so I really had to work hard at bringing the life force back into my body. And that was one way I would do it. I would breathe in the new, the healthy, the joy, the abundance, and I would breathe out old sickness, dis-ease, things that no longer serve me. And that's really what I would picture a lot of times in my meditation was exactly that pattern. I'm getting chills even now just like thinking about this, but
Mm.
it sounds a little maybe woo to some people, but it is coming back to healing our nervous system. And so many of us have such dysregulation there, we're not even aware of it. And I know for me, my internal compass was really broken because of the environment I came out of as a child. And I know my family loves me and they did everything that they could, but there were still things that were happening on a trauma level that just put what I assumed was like normal as my measure. And then when I get out of that space and I look back, I'm like, oh dang, that wasn't normal. And so you have to allow yourself to shift into a space of healthy versus what wasn't healthy and figure out again new patterns and new ways to teach self. And I also do theta healing, which sounds maybe similar to what you're doing, where it's like therapy without words and you're just really witnessing, you're checking some core beliefs in people to see like are they safe in their own body, are you test some of these things and see what it comes back as, and then you can help to reprogram that on a subconscious level because 95% of our day is spent operating on a subconscious level where we're getting through our day based off of patterns and systems we learned as a child where we were learning how to survive in the world. And so we're not even aware that we're still operating on this space. And maybe 5% of our day, we're consciously making decisions differently. And so it's important to get to that root issue and reprogram that so that our subconscious is now programmed to operate in a space that serves us now where we are as a healthy individual, as opposed to where we were back then, where maybe even that was healthy at that time. It just doesn't serve us any longer now.
Thank you. That's amazing information. And I'd like to also share then with them an opportunity on how to safely go outdoors, how to safely enjoy nature, and then what do you do when you return? What can we do to let people, because it's so important to be in nature. It's so important to be at one with all of it because that is a big place that can absolutely regulate your nervous system. Soil, dirt, the components and the minerals and the nutrients can pull negative energy out of you. And literally, it's like taking an antidepressant. So, we want to encourage people to be absorbed in nature. How do they protect themselves?
Aside from getting a bubble suit, which I've contemplated, there are some more practical ways, although you still might look a little goofy. So you want to be wearing light colored clothing, long sleeves, a hat, tuck your pant legs into socks. So that really gives less exposure area for the ticks. I would encourage you to even think about taking duct tape and wrapping it with the sticky side out on the bottom half of your leg because generally speaking, ticks are going to be found in the grass or the lower 5 feet of the environment. And so if they're crawling up you from the ground up, they get caught on that duct tape. You can also wear clothing that's specifically treated with a chemical called permethrin, but mark my words in that it is a chemical, right? And so you want to only apply that to clothing and let it dry before you put it onto your body. It is toxic to cats, especially when it's wet. So just be careful about that. And also, it's a little bit it's not a little bit, it's very disruptive to bees and some of the other things in nature. So you really have to be mindful where you're spraying it, and actual application area that that's being put on. But for people who are into camping, like it's great thing to spray onto your tent. Or again, they make special clothing that you can buy that's already treated with permethrin and that'll last about 70 washes. So if you're into gardening and you have a specific gardening outfit that you'd like to wear, go ahead and spray that. But again, just be mindful that it can be disruptive to other insects and animals as well, not just ticks, unfortunately. And then you can also get yourself some great essential oils, eucalyptus, lemongrass, lavender. These are all natural remedies to fight against them. But again, we can't really prove the efficacy rate or the duration that these things will last. So you just want to be frequently reapplying them if you're going with the natural route. You can also get something with DEET in it. Off Deep Woods makes a product with DEET, and you want to be mindful of the concentration levels of that, especially when we're looking at children. I think it's 10% DEET is good for kids, whereas you can do like 25 to 30% as a grown up. But again, these are chemicals and that can technically be applied directly to your skin. But I often think, do I want this devil or do I want that devil? Would I rather have Lyme or would I rather have chemical exposure? So I really do my best again to stay more with the natural stuff. And then stay in the center of trails. Don't find your way off the path through the willowy stuff because a lot of times that's really where ticks are waiting. Traditionally speaking, ticks quest, where they will use their second set of legs. They have eight legs. They're an arachnid and an ectoparasite, meaning that they feed on us externally, but they'll use their third and fourth set of legs to hold onto a blade of grass, which leaves their top two waiting out there to grab onto whatever happens to pass by. People aren't their main target. We're just a live blood meal like any other animal. And unfortunately, we get caught in the crossfire. So, again, avoid long grass, leaf litter, try to stay away from wooden picnic benches because they retain moisture, and a lot of times they'll find a good amount of ticks on the underside of a park bench or picnic bench. Stay away from fallen wood, rock walls, because those will house um, the little rodents that a lot of times are responsible for a tick contracting Lyme in the first place. It's not specifically the deer that are responsible for ticks and Lyme. It is more of the white-footed mouse and the small rodent population. Deer just present as a ride for the ticks, if you will, and help them to make their way through nature. Ticks generally aren't going to go further than a mile in their lifetime unless they actually get on an animal and get a ride somewhere. Um, there are new types of ticks, one in particular called the Lone Star tick. And this isn't meaning it's from Texas. This is meaning that it has a singular white star in its back. They are aggressive hunter ticks where they can actively sense our body heat vibrations from at least 25 yards away, and they will actively engage in chasing us if they come into contact with us. They're wanting to feed themselves. So whereas again, I said most traditionally was questing, now we've got this new thing that's actually actively hunting. Not that exciting. And so then, when you come in from outside, obviously you want to do a tick check immediately. There's a great tool that you can use for your dogs because they're also prime opportunity for ticks to come into contact with us. It's called a tick mitt, and it's basically almost like Velcro that when you rub it over your dog, it catches the ticks as they're crawling through your dog's fur. But take your clothing after you already do kind of a tick check. And some people will carry a lint roller with them if they're out hiking before they get in their car and lint roller themselves first, or take a change of clothing with you, put what you're hiking in into a plastic bag until you get home, put that in the dryer on high heat for a minimum of 10 to 15 minutes because that will kill the ticks. They require moisture and shade to survive. Heat and dryness are not a tick's friend because they will dry out. So you're doing yourself that by cooking them basically. Don't put them in the wash first. They can survive through the wash. Put that directly into the dryer and then wash your clothing. Take a shower within 2 hours of coming in outdoors because that's oftentimes before they've actually attached to you that you're still able to rinse them off of your body. And again, just get in the habit of doing the daily tick checks. Check behind your ears, check in your ears, your belly button, around where your bra strap sits, around your waistband, your private parts, in between your toes, behind your knees. They, again, will hide more in places that are more moist. Like, again, your waistband, if you're sweating a lot there, they like that kind of environment or moist and dark. And they are the size of a poppy seed or the grain of sand. They're very, very small. So that also makes it a little bit more challenging to find them. They secrete a numbing agent when they bite you, so you don't feel them. And if you do find a tick, this is really imperative though. If you find a tick on you, if you're lucky enough to do that, remove it as fast as possible. It is a time sensitive transmission, but get it as close to the base of its mouth as possible and pull it straight up and off. Save that tick. You want to send it in for testing. You can get a tick tested much more readily for sickness than you can as a human. Again, going back to the thought that that diagnostic tool that we have is maybe 35% accurate, tick testing the tick is way more accurate. And so 50% of the ticks out of maybe 12,000 that they've tested in Pennsylvania had one or more illnesses on board. So you have a 50-50 shot, right? Maybe it's not a sick tick. And if it's not, then I would still encourage you to monitor yourself over time. And if you have weird medical symptoms cropping up, talk to your doctor about the fact that you still have been bitten by a tick. But if you get a positive test, then you want to get on antibiotics as fast as possible because Lyme is a spirochete. It's a corkscrew shaped organism that left unchecked will burrow into your tissues, your brain, the white matter in your body, like collagen. Where in the beginning, it's still in the bloodstream, that antibiotics generally can knock it out of your system before it has time to really disseminate throughout the rest of your body. Once it's past that initial phase, antibiotics become a little bit less effective because, as I've mentioned, it's going now into our tissue or our brain where antibiotics do not readily penetrate. And so it just makes it a lot harder to heal from. But there are things like Powassan virus, which can be transmitted in as little as 15 minutes. And that causes a hemorrhagic brain fever. There was a guy in the news recently that I saw that was getting a lot of attention because he lost the ability to speak and he is like in a coma basically from Powassan virus. Then we've got alpha gal syndrome, which is another thing that's been making headlines lately because it's causing people to die. It gives you an anaphylactic reaction to mammal products like red meat and dairy. And so some guy my age was having a picnic and eating a hamburger, and the next thing you know, he died, and they couldn't figure out what happened to him because he was generally speaking pretty healthy dude. And after about 10 months of research, they've come to the conclusion that he had alpha gal syndrome and was having an anaphylactic shock to that hamburger that he ingested. But why I really want to touch on that as well is we think about people taking medications. Certain medications are made with gelatin made out of cows. And so they're having that reaction. One of my good friends had to be medevaced out of a ravine she was hiking through because she kept vomiting so profusely. She couldn't walk any further. And so they had to like medevac her out. She was telling me about it. And I said, "Hey, have you ever been tested for tick-borne illness?" She's like, "No, my mom suggested the same thing because I've been bit by a lot of ticks." And it turns out she had alpha gal and she was just having a reaction to that. And that's how her body was processing that. But she had a whole other slew of symptoms that all made sense then that connected into that. Um, but then also, if it is something like Lyme that that tick is transmitting, if it had been feeding on a different blood meal, like a deer or rabbit or whatever it was sucking on, and it fell off mid feed, and then it happens to come into contact with you, it can transmit something much faster because that cycle has already been started, that regurgitation process. So again, anytime you're coming into contact with environment where you might have ticks, like someone I know just messaged about her kid and he has this rash that is growing and it's been 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, you should definitely, and the doctor agrees that it's Lyme, get on treatment as soon as possible. And it's not just the antibiotics, as I've alluded to. You really want to think about some different herbs and remedies. And I'm by no means a doctor, but I would say this isn't medical advice. This is just what I would do as a human. Get on things like andrographis, cat's claw, resveratrol, um, garlic, certain immune boosting or vitamins like vitamin D, vitamin C. These are all things that are just going to help the immune system have a greater response to what has now come into the body. Um, and just don't mess around with it, right? Like I know people are like, oh, I don't want to take too many antibiotics. And I had someone tell me, you shouldn't really be taking those antibiotics. You should save that for a time when you're really sick. And that person's lucky they're still alive because I wanted to really say, like, listen, I'm fighting for my life right now. And that's something I really also want to impart upon people is if you know someone's struggling with Lyme and tick-borne illness, please be compassionate to them. It's not something that is visible in terms of like cancer where we're going through treatment and we're losing our hair and we're having all some people are losing their hair with Lyme and tick-borne illness. That is actually a side effect of it sometimes. But while it's an invisible illness, like we're legitimately fighting for our life every day. And you really need to be kind to that person and understand that while you can't see what's happening to them, they again really need your love and support and understanding at that time to help them.
Absolutely. That's wonderful information. And you can find more information on Anne's Facebook and Instagram, her LinkedIn. I'll have that information posted in our link. And Anne Desjardins, you can have her subscribe to the Silver Lyming on YouTube. We'll also have a link to that. And this has been fascinating. I so appreciate all of the work that you have done, the information you provided. Is there anything else that you feel people need to know before we end this?
Um, again, maybe just to really take this more as a serious threat against people, right? Like I lost a very close friend 2 years ago. He passed away from this, and I actually know, unfortunately, a lot of people who have passed away from this. And while it might be presented as something that's easily treated with 2 weeks of antibiotics and you go off on your happy way, I unfortunately live in this space now for 10 years. And I know that's not necessarily accurate. And you really do want to take this as seriously as possible. So, whether it's putting on repellent or doing the tick checks or whatever it is, I mean, putting on repellent is takes a minute and it could save your life. So just please again heed these words. As we say in the Lyme community, you don't get it until you get it. And once you got it, it's too late. And so don't wait for that to happen to you. Please take the time to talk to your children about this, check your pets, check your loved ones, and just, do the best that you can to avoid this at all costs.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today. It's such an important service that you're providing to get this information out there. And I just really appreciate you. And I appreciate all of you. And I hope that if you know someone that's suffering, you can share this information. Make sure that you like and share, subscribe so that you can know when we get more amazing information like this coming out. And we'll be here for you and tune in again. Thanks a
So
lot.
I throw up
Thanks,
my
Michelle.
hands and praise you again and again. 'Cause all that I have is a heart.